Hi, I'm Ben Neill. I wanted to take a few minutes to demonstrate some of the technologies that I'm using in Fantini Futuro. I control all the music and visual elements in the piece in real time, and I'm wearing these augmented reality glasses so that I can see my computer screen at all times during the piece, even when I'm walking around the space or reading music. This lets me keep track of everything that I'm controlling in the performance. This is the Mutantrumpet version 4, created over the last several years with a team of instrument makers, technicians, and programmers in the Netherlands, Australia, and New York City. I've been developing the Mutantrumpet as the primary vehicle for my work as a composer-performer since the 1980s. You can see it has 3 bells instead of the normal single bell, which I'm able to switch between with this extra set of valves, creating multi-timbral effects. A glissando is also possible with the help of a mini trombone slide and a piccolo trumpet bell. A quarter tone valve enables me to play quarter tones. The Mutantrumpet has 32 onboard electronic controllers, switches, knobs, a fader, XY joysticks up here, and a distance sensor. There's a pickup in the mouthpiece which takes the acoustic sound, sends it to the computer, and makes it available for digital processing and triggering. A microphone amplifies and captures the acoustic sound for live sampling and processing. When I press this switch, it samples my sound into a buffer for a predetermined number of seconds. Now when I start to play other notes, I'll trigger that sound back. I can start to manipulate it, changing the pitch using this joystick. The joystick is tuned to the overtone series to reflect the harmonic structure of the trumpet. I can add other notes, and then create all kinds of other effects, such as granular processing. When I press another switch on the trumpet, I can have the computer play back what I just played. Now I'll make another sample. The electronic controllers are mapped to control video as well as audio. In this example, the length of the live audio samples and the number of flags in the video are controlled by the same 2 knobs, one here and one over on this side. So I'll play a short phrase, that phrase will be sampled, and then as I start changing the length and the repetition of the notes in that phrase, you'll see the flags multiply in a similar ratio. The
Okay, that is unbelievable. We have,
Well, that's what we like to hear. Yeah.
yeah, we have Ben Neill with us, the inventor of the Mutantrumpet, and I watched this video, I don't know, 8 or 10 times. I even showed my kids, and I mean, the implications of this instrument are just stunning. We've had a guy named Paul Hansen several times on the channel, and I've even recorded with him, and he uses an electroacoustic pickup in the mouthpiece of his bassoon. So, and he calls it an electric bassoon. But Ben, what you have going on is like, it feels like an order of magnitude or two beyond that. And to watch you perform or play this thing, I mean, you're a mad scientist.
Well, I have been called that. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. This is version 4 of this instrument. Like, can you tell us sort of the evolution? Where did this thing come from, and what were the previous iterations like?
I started working with the idea in the early 1980s. I was trained as a classical trumpet player, but I got a bit disillusioned with the idea of just having a straight classical career. I was interested in a lot of other kinds of music. I grew up listening to a lot of art rock, David Bowie, Brian Eno, the electric work of Miles Davis, minimalism, Steve Reich, Philip Glass. John Hassel, the electronic trumpet player, was somebody who I had a great deal of respect for, who later became a mentor to me when I moved to New York. And but I was playing a lot of contemporary music, music of avant-garde composers, Cage and Stockhausen, and also at that time I was living in Northeast Ohio, and I was involved in the punk new wave scene that was very vibrant around there in the early 80s. So I started thinking about taking the trumpet in a different kind of creative direction. And I had a trumpet that I could remove the bell from, and started sticking that onto the first valve slide. Of course, that meant that the first valve would not function normally. So it was very limited in what it could do. And I happened to be in a brass ensemble with a guy, Rob Cole, who had worked at the King Instrument Factory. And so we said, well, let's try to make something like this. So we put an extra set of valves on it with an extra bell. It was made out of 2 just junky student trumpets, like Bundy trumpets. And of course, I didn't have a case for it. I used to carry it around in a laundry bag. So it started out as, pretty goofy, not a joke, but it was quite crude.
I'd call it punk rock.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and that was really the context that I was using it in a lot. But then I moved to New York. I started getting a bit more serious about trying to do a composer performer project where I wasn't interested in developing an instrument for other people to play, or like a design project in that sense. I was looking for something that would give me a unique voice as a composer performer. And one of the things that I had thought about right away, and I was interested in synthesizers. I had a Korg MS-10, and I could plug the trumpet, run that through some filters and things like that. And I met Bob Moog, and he had sold his interest in the Moog Company at that time and was doing freelance projects. And he took a great interest in it and invited me to his home numerous times. We became quite close, and he designed the first electronic processing system for it, which was all analog. It was an analog pitch to voltage device with a little rack of Centon analog synthesizer modules. And then, I continued to work with the instrument as I was in New York, and started doing more solo pieces, and working with my own ensemble and that kind of thing. And then in the early 90s, I was invited to the Stein instrumentals, electro instrumental studio in Amsterdam. And that was where I really made it fully computer interactive. I had, Moog had shown me some of the first pitch to MIDI devices, which, I had been fooling around with those. But when I went to Stein in the early 90s, that was when I got some switches on the instrument and was able to really use it to start interacting with computers. And it just kind of has continued from there. Yeah.
So this, when you talk about finding your own voice, this instrument in particular, it doesn't sound like it's different. It's such a visual experience. So tell me about like coming up with your own sound, but at the same time, like doing something that's so visually different.
Yeah. Well, the visual part of it, the concept of it was that, the trumpet is it's a single voice, obviously. And a lot of the contemporary experimental music that I was playing going back, into the 70s and 80s I'm talking about more contemporary classical like Cage and Stockhausen, that kind of stuff. It required all kinds of crazy mute changes because, timbre, composers got really interested in timbre. And so I was interested in creating this multi-timbral instrument. And the way that, I chose to do that, opted to do that, was with these different bells with different mutes in them. And so, one of the really key kind of gestures that I use, which you heard in that demo video, is this kind of gradual shift from an open sound to a muted sound, which is done by pressing the valve down slowly. And what that does is it creates a timbral shift that's akin to like a filter sweep, essentially. So I was looking to integrate electronics and the acoustic side, not only by adding electronics to an acoustic instrument, but also making my acoustic instrument have a sound quality and a sonic vocabulary that was more related to electronic music. And yeah, the visual aspect of it, it's funny. I didn't really think about that much. I mean, I know it is pretty wacky looking, Dr. Seuss-ish, a little bit, some people have said, but I guess I became accustomed to it after, fairly quickly. And I did a lot of work with, I've done a lot of different kinds of music with the instrument, but I was interested in this idea of these multiple voices, that I could have a single instrument that with these multiple voices, kind of like a conversation and, things echoing back and forth, again, purely in the acoustic realm, and then taking that further by putting it into the electronic world.
Yeah, that's what fascinates me the most. In your demo video, it's so compelling that it sounds like you are playing or you're part of a quartet.
Right.
And it sounds like a full symphony. It's kind of a big sound, and you're able to manipulate all of this. The video manipulation aspect is a whole other planet that we can get to in a little bit. I want to share one of the clips now that we're like coming up to the halfway mark. Sure. But yeah, let's talk a little more about that when we after this little clip.
Distance sensor on the side.
So that was a clip from your upcoming, well, you've already performed this piece, but you have an upcoming show. Can you tell
Right.
us about what's going on this week, this coming Thursday in New York City?
Yes, well, Fantini Futuro is a piece that I've been working on for close to 10 years. I would say 8 years. One of the things when I develop a new version of the instrument, I always have at least one piece, usually primarily one piece that I utilize as basically, as how I build the instrument. Like I'm creating the piece as I'm building the instrument. And I got interested in this historical trumpet player, Girolamo Fantini. Being a classically trained trumpeter, while that's not the only type of music that I do, but most of the music that I'm better known for is more in the electronica, trip hop, ambient kind of world. But I have done a number of pieces over the years that kind of reflect back on different historical aspects of the trumpet. And Girolamo Fantini was a 17th century trumpet player who was actually the first person to play the trumpet indoors. The trumpet was strictly an outdoor instrument until he brought it indoors. And I got inspired by that, and I thought about how while he was trying to bring the trumpet, or he did bring the trumpet from outdoors to indoors, I'm bringing it from the physical world into the virtual world, basically, into this new kind of digital realm. And so that was the inspiration. And what I did is I went back and he wrote a famous book. It was one of the method book. It was really one of the first method books for trumpet. And so I created a piece that is basically remixing, sampling, and writing music that is inspired by his music. And in that clip that you just played, so all of those sounds that you heard coming from the trumpet, that's all live. There's nothing pre-recorded. So I have several different layers of these live samples that are going on, and then I'm able to manipulate those and process them. And then the other thing I did is I had several visiting artist residencies at the American Academy in Rome, and I went to all the places where Fantini was known to have lived and worked, and took video, filmed, photos, and then created this interactive video, which I also control in real time from the trumpet during the performance. And so we played the piece twice just before the pandemic. And this week, we have a big performance in New York City at St. Patrick's Old Cathedral. It's in Soho, and we're doing a full projection mapping experience on the columns of the church, the ceiling, which is 80 feet high, and a big, large screen in front. And we just performed it last week, too, up at Eastern Connecticut State University, which also has this beautiful theater with a kind of panoramic curved screen. So it's very exciting. And this was really the kind of my vision of the piece from the beginning. I was hoping to get into doing projection mapping. I've been doing interactive video for a long time. And the other thing that's going to be unique about this upcoming show is actually a benefit for the historic organs in the church. And we're going to actually be incorporating those organs, which go back to the 19th century, rather than digital simulations that we've been using in the past. And it's just a trio: myself, Ryland Angel, a countertenor, and Gwendolyn Toth. And they're both wonderful musicians who have specialized in early music, but also done a lot of contemporary music. So there's a lot of improvisation. I tried to keep it fairly loose because also that's in the spirit of the music of Fantini's time. You look at his music, it's incredibly simple. His music for trumpet and keyboard, it's one melodic line and a bass line, and everything else was just filled in. So it's exciting, yeah, and it's something we've been building up to for a few months, and going to start loading in tomorrow, actually. So.
Well, congratulations. That sounds
Thank you.
like a wonderful opportunity. I'm curious, how much outboard gear do you need? I mean, I've seen Robert Fripp. He's got this, huge 4 or 5 foot rack cabinet
Well,
that he carries with him.
I've been there. I mean, I lugged, 80-pound cases all over Europe in the 80s and everything. But, with this new trumpet, it's really all inside the box. I mean, the trumpet plugs straight into the laptop with USB. I have no extra, and so I basically have two laptops, one for the audio and one for the video, and two audio interfaces. That's it.
That's
And
incredible.
then that's all I travel with. I mean, which is, it's great that the load has been lightened over the decades,
Oh,
because,
man.
but like for this show, I'm working with a couple of different projection mapping companies that are helping me with all the projectors and everything. But in terms of what I actually use to generate the whole show, it's quite portable and economical, and that's something that I would say that I've been really striving toward generally in my work. I always look for economical and sort of reductionist, minimal kinds of solutions, things that can give a big output for a small input.
Man, I have so many other questions, but I'd like to keep these to half hour. I mean, you're one of the only people I've seen using augmented reality glasses.
Yeah.
That's not Google Glass, but also using augmented reality glasses as a controller, and so you can see what's going on, right?
Yeah, I start the piece in the back of the space, and as I walk in, I'm playing this kind of cow horn and a conch shell, and I've got some sensors on my hand so that I can trigger my live samples from the distance. But I've got to be able to see my screen as I'm walking around so that I know, okay, now it's triggered, now it's ending, and just be able to trigger things. And also it really helps me during the piece because there are parts where I have to read music, and that way I have my what I need to see in terms of my feedback from my software, and I can read the music at the same time without having to be jumping, looking at the computer all the time. So it works pretty well. I mean, I'm using these Vuzix glasses. I'd like to be able to get more information, but for what I'm doing, it's working well.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So we have a couple questions from people in the chat, and if you have any questions and you're watching this, please ask while we're live. First question comes from Peter McDowell, who is going to see you this Thursday. He says he's very excited. He says, if you could perform with a living musician, who would be your dream artist?
I guess I'd say Brian Eno. I had the opportunity to see Brian Eno perform at the Acropolis in Athens last summer, which was, one of the only times that he's performed in decades, and it was a great show. It was, he was playing material off of this new album that he just came out with, but since a lot of the work that I do is in the ambient genre, that would be exciting. I will say I have recently been performing with Lamont Young, who is my teacher, and who Brian Eno called the daddy of us all, the father of minimalism. And over the last year, I've been playing his music since the early '80s, but I've been playing in his small group for the last year, and that's been a kind of realized dream, like to get to perform with him as well.
Yep. And then Sharon Baker, our trusty moderator, is asking, how did you end up meeting Mimi? I'm going to guess it's
Gazy.
Gazy. Okay. My wife is German, and she would probably say it's Gersa.
Yeah. Well, Mimi and I were kind of in the same music scene in New York in the late '80s and 1990s. downtown electronic music. Well, she had a band, Hugo Largo, that actually was on Brian Eno's Opal label. One of their albums was also produced by Michael Stipe. And I had heard Hugo Largo, and then when she came out with her solo album, Soak, which was on David Byrne's label, she invited me to come sit in a couple of the shows that she was doing, which I was thrilled about. I think Mimi is just a brilliant talent. And then I asked her about working with me to add some vocals to some music that I had been working on, and we ended up doing 2 albums together. We did a music theater piece, a little bit like the Fantini piece, with some historical elements to it at the Brooklyn Academy of Music Next Wave Festival, and we played at Big Ears a couple of years ago. So yeah, I've had a wonderful collaboration with her, and that was a very vibrant time in New York, the late '80s and '90s, and we had a really great connection, and still do. We haven't been performing together, as of recently, but we did release an album in 2020, Life You Are. So.
That's fantastic. So we're coming to the end of the program, and I just want to restate that this Thursday, Ben is performing in New York City. We have the details in the live chat. Sharon has been posting that. The Basilica of Old St. Patrick's Cathedral on Mulberry Street in Soho, November 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern, where physically you will be. And one other thing I want to recommend to people is to check out Ben's Spotify. He is, well, why don't you tell them what to expect in your most popular songs? Because it's not like what we've heard so far, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I alluded to earlier, the music that I'm best known for is more in the ambient and groove-oriented trip hop vibe. Over the pandemic, I did a project called Trove, which is all ambient pieces that are purely made with the Mutantrumpet. I released 2 tracks a week for a year. So it's essentially a 104-track album it's been played on a lot of the different kinds of meditation and sleep, relaxation, yoga playlists, and things like that. So chill out music, ambient music, down tempo, trip hop. If you go back into my work on my Verve albums from the 90s, you'll hear some drum and bass and harder break beats and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Very cool. And Wes Darling has just added a last-second question. He said he just saw the stream was on this trumpet thing and was interested because he's a big fan of Niels Petter Molvær of Nordub. Has he ever played a Mutantrumpet?
He hasn't, but we have shared a stage. We played on the same stage a couple of times, actually, back in the 90s on some jazz festivals, and we occasionally have some interactions. I've followed his work and respect him very much. I feel a real kinship with what he does, for sure. Yeah.
Right on. So we've got Ben's URL here in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and then his Instagram in the lower right-hand corner. So go to those URLs and check him out. And apparently Peter McDowell just realized there's a correction that needs to be made to the address for the show. It's on Mott Street, 261 Mott Street, not on Mulberry.
Yeah, there's 2 entrances to the church, I guess. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right. Cool. Anyway, check out these URLs. Follow Ben. Find out more about this show, and I'd really appreciate if you're watching this if you would consider subscribing, click the like button, and tell the algorithm Ben Neill should be in more people's eyes and ears. And then finally, if you want to support Make Weird Music, we do have a join button below the YouTube player. And it's just a small $3 a month contribution, but I can tell you it makes a big difference for me in my ability to actually keep the site going without dipping into my personal savings, which aggravates my wife. Anyway, follow Ben, check out his music, and hopefully you'll make it to the show this Thursday. And we're going to close with one final clip. Was one of these excerpts the same as the YouTube video, so I don't duplicate?
No,
Okay.
no, those other, yeah.
Here we go. All right, cool. That was the end. Let's end the stream.